In college and as a pro running back, O.J. Simpson excelled. The juice parlayed football fame, looks, and charm into a career as a movie actor, TV commentator, and spokesman for Hertz Rent-A-Car. Never monogamous, he beat both his first and second wives on many occasions. After a bitter divorce from Nicole Brown, he stalked her. Nicole had called police at least 8 times, but Simpson was a hero. The police did nothing. She had called a domestic violence hotline. She hid Polaroids of her beaten face in a safe deposit box, along with letters from O.J. apologizing for beating her. The afternoon of June 12, 1994, Simpson's youngest daughter, Sydney, performed in a school pageant. O.J. laughed with his kids and glad-handed his in-laws, but glowered at his ex-wife. He was not invited to a dinner afterward at Mezzaluna, a trendy bistro. The party stayed until 8:30 or 9. A few minutes later, Nicole called, asking about her mother's glasses. 25-year-old waiter Ron Goldman promised to drop them by. A little after 9, O.J. returned to his home, ranting to house guest Brian Cato Kalin about the short length of Nicole's skirt. He then went to Cato's guest house in the rear of the estate and asked to borrow $5 to pay the skycab at LAX. Then he told Kalin he was going to McDonald's. Kalin invited himself along. They returned to Rockingham at 9:35. About 9:45, Ron Goldman left Mezzaluna with the glasses left by Nicole's mother. He stopped off at his home to change clothes. At 10:22, a limousine driven by Alan Park pulled up to Rockingham. Park found the address by looking for the street numbers on the curb. He was 20 minutes early. There was no response to the intercom buzzer. Sometime between 10:15 and 10:40 p.m., someone knifed Nicole Brown to death in front of her townhouse on Bundy Drive, so viciously she was nearly decapitated. Ron Goldman was attacked and murdered moments later after a violent struggle. At 10:40, chauffeur Alan Park buzzed O.J.'s intercom again. No answer. No response when he buzzed at 10:43 or again at 10:49. At about 10:50 in the guest house on O.J. Simpson's estate, house guest Brian Cato Kalin was talking on the phone with a girlfriend when he heard 3 loud bumps against his bedroom wall. At 10:53, on the phone reporting a no-show to his boss, Park saw Cato at the rear of the house with a flashlight. A moment later, Park observed a tall black man dressed in dark clothes moving toward the house. At 10:55, O.J. Simpson answered the intercom, claiming he had overslept and had been in the shower. Simpson's hair was dry. Cato Kalin helped Park load Simpson's bags into the limo. When Cato grabbed a small knapsack, O.J. stopped him, saying, "No, I'll get that." At LAX, Simpson clutched the knapsack, pausing near a trash can, then boarded his flight to Chicago. Some fellow passengers noticed he wore no socks. No one ever saw the knapsack again. Around midnight, neighbors followed Nicole's little Akita, Cato, back to Nicole's residence. The dog's legs were covered with blood. They discovered 2 bodies. Uniformed cops closed off the crime scene. They noted the bodies, the blood, and certain clues. A single brown leather glove, a pair of glasses in an envelope, a dark knit cap. At 5:30 a.m., detectives drove to O.J.'s home to notify him of Nicole's death and that his kids were at the station in protective custody. One of the cops, Mark Furman, recalled a dispute between the couple he had answered years before. No one answered repeated calls at the gate, although there were lights on inside. They noticed blood drops inside the Bronco, a blood trail leading to the house and a trail within the house. Exploring the rear of the grounds, Detective Furman woke Cato and questioned him, trying to tell if he was on drugs or had blood stains on him. In a narrow alcove behind the guest house, Furman found another leather glove. He brought the 3 other cops to see it. It matched the glove at Bundy. In his Chicago hotel, Simpson received a call from LA police notifying him that Nicole was dead. O.J. expressed shock, but never asked the question almost invariably asked by the next of kin, how did it happen? O.J. took the next flight back. He spent most of the time on his cell phone, talking to his lawyer. Questioned by veteran detectives Phil Van Atter and Tom Lang, O.J. could not explain the cuts on his fingers. He sounded upbeat, kidding with the cops. Police used common sense coupled with a linkage theory developed by forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee of the Connecticut State Crime Lab. The linkage connected the victim, crime scene, evidence, and perpetrator. Blood at the scene was obviously that of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. Blood in the Bronco parked askew at his curb was a combination of both victims plus Simpson's own. Police found one bloody glove at Bundy and the mate behind the guest house. Blood on this glove showed DNA of O.J., Nicole, and Ron Goldman. The knit ski cap found near Ron Goldman's body had fibers identical to those from the Bronco. Stuck to Ron's bloody shirt was a head hair which matched O.J. Simpson's. At Bundy, police found a distinctive shoe print in the blood, a size 12 Bruno Molly, expensive, extremely rare. O.J. denied he would ever wear such ugly-ass shoes. In O.J.'s bedroom, a pair of socks bore traces of Nicole's blood, dark spots nearly invisible against the black fabric. D.A. Gil Garcetti assigned the case to Marcia Clark, an attractive single mother, and Bill Hodgman, whose ill health forced him to drop out. Rising to second position, Assistant D.A. Christopher Darden found himself prosecuting a hero, although O.J. had done nothing for his own community. O.J. conferred with several intimate friends, attorney Skip Taft, personal assistant Kathy Randa, loyal friend Al Cowlings, known as AC. Knowing O.J. was a suspect in a double homicide, his friends did everything to insulate him. Cato, hiding at a friend's house, was summoned as a potential alibi, but Kalin said he couldn't account for Simpson's missing 90 minutes. Simpson said he was nervous about taking a polygraph because he had had dreams about killing Nicole, and the lie detector results might make him look guilty. Cynics might think that O.J. was planting an alibi for when he flunked the test. While the LAPD waited for Simpson to voluntarily come to headquarters, the suspect disappeared. Hours later, he was spotted on the LA freeways with his friend Al Cowlings. Simpson had a gun. Networks broadcast the slow-speed chase across America, a bizarre, real-life, prime-time adventure. Finally arriving at his home, O.J. submitted to arrest. He said he was visiting Nicole's grave. The direction of his travel undermined his excuse. So did items found in the Bronco: $10,000 in cash, his passport, and a fake mustache and beard. Simpson assembled the so-called Dream Team, lawyers with distinct talents and conflicting agendas. Flamboyant Johnny Cochran knew Los Angeles politics and juries. He would portray the police as fumbling racists entrapping an innocent black man. Dapper Robert Shapiro, annoyed at playing second fiddle to Cochran, frequently found his tactics overruled. Past his prime, F. Lee Bailey remained a specialist in courtroom theatrics. Initially convinced of Simpson's guilt, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz used the trial as a venue to expose widespread police irregularities. Barry Scheck's reputation rested on using DNA science to free wrongly convicted men. Now he used his expertise to try to prove this DNA evidence unreliable. Darden's high regard for Cochran changed to disgust over the next few months as the defense team pulled dirty trick after dirty trick. Shapiro told the DAs that Simpson would submit to a polygraph test. Not admissible as evidence, the results still carried emotional weight. Clark and her team declined, suspecting a trick. It was a doozy. O.J. flunked a polygraph exam secretly given by his own team. Every answer he gave about the murders was deceptive. Shapiro had bluffed, and the DAs fell for the trick. Johnny Cochran's opening statement promised more than he delivered. A housemaid would swear Simpson's Bronco was parked at home at the time of the murders. A woman saw a suspicious white man lurking near Nicole's home. An ex-NFL doctor would show O.J. Simpson was in no shape to walk, much less kill. A neighbor would prove the murder timeline incorrect. Housemaid Rosa Lopez had obviously been coached, pretended not to understand questions, and contradicted herself. Testifying outside the presence of the jury, she vanished into obscurity. Dr. Robert Huizenga stated that he had examined O.J. the day he fled in the Bronco, and that although he might look like Tarzan, Simpson walked more like Tarzan's grandfather. The DAs showed an exercise tape of Simpson leaping, bouncing, and jumping. The smirking doctor left the stand. The defense called wizened little Robert Heidstra, but he bolstered the argument for Simpson's guilt. Heidstra said he was walking his dog about 10:30 when he passed Nicole's home and heard a man yell, "Hey, hey, hey!" in a lower voice, a black man's voice. Cochran objected to his own witness, saying it was impossible to recognize a black man's voice in the dark. A few minutes later, Heidstra saw a white car zooming out of the darkness. Cross-examined, he admitted the car could have been a Ford Bronco, the kind O.J. was driving. The defense's major hired expert was eminent Dr. Henry Lee, who patiently explained the process of forensic investigation in minute detail. His exam of crime scene photos indicated the presence of a second footprint, indicating more than one killer. But Dr. Lee was not saying there was anything wrong in the logic of the evidence. His own theory of linkage showed that only O.J. could be the killer, and the so-called second footprint turned out to be a crinkle in the concrete. As if by unspoken mutual assent, both sides discreetly avoided mentioning drug use by the victims or the accused. Only Cochran brought up the subject with an absurd theory that Colombian drug dealers targeted Nicole's friend Faye Resnick over a hypothetical drug deal, then killed Nicole by mistake. No evidence indicated Resnick dealt quantities of drugs, and she looked as much like Nicole as Judge Ito resembled Chris Darden. When a pair of gloves matching the murder gloves didn't arrive on time, the defense bluffed Darden into a dramatic blunder. Simpson was told to slip the murder gloves onto his hands in front of the jury. Cleverly, Simpson wriggled his large hands into the tight leather gloves, making them appear to be too small. That cued Cochran's closing mantra. The leather gloves had shrunk in the testing process, and latex inner gloves on O.J.'s hands made them even tighter. Video clips of Simpson showed that an identical pair of gloves were also tight. But the damage was done. There was a mountain of evidence, perhaps too much for the jury. Scientific testimony seemed to drone on forever. More damaging was perjury by Mark Furman. Grilled by F. Lee Bailey, he denied he was a racist, planting evidence or overstepping the law when he entered O.J.'s yard the night of the murder. Later evidence showed that Furman had used the word within the last 10 years. He had spun exaggerated cops and robbers' tales on tape for would-be screenwriter Laura Hart McKinney, affecting a hard-bitten racist identity like a Joseph Wambaugh character. Whatever the explanation, Furman had lied on the stand, which cast doubt on anything he or other cops said. The trial consumed 372 days. The exhausted jurors took less than 2 hours to return a verdict.
And would you return those to our four-person juror number 1? All right, Madam Foreperson, would you please open the envelope and check the condition of the verdict forms? All right, Madam Foreperson, you've had the opportunity to review the verdict forms. Are they the same forms that you signed, and are they in order? All right, would you hand those, please, to Deputy Trevor? And you have signed and dated those verdict forms indicating the jury's verdict? All right, thank you. I'm going to ask that you carefully listen to the verdicts as they are being read by the clerk, Mrs. Robertson, as after the verdicts have been read, you will be asked if these are your verdicts. And I would caution the audience during the course of the reading of these verdicts to remain calm, and that if there is any disruption during the reading of the verdicts, the bailiffs will have the obligation to remove any persons disrupting these proceedings. All right, Mrs. Robertson. All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury? Mrs. Robertson.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least 1 crime of murder of the first degree and 1 or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this 2nd day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes. All right, counsel, Mr. Simpson, would you be seated, please? Let's have it quiet in the courtroom, please.
O.J.'s glee was matched by Robert Kardashian's look of shock. By then, even he believed O.J. to be the murderer. National reaction to the verdict was split along racial lines. White trial watchers were dumbfounded and furious at the miscarriage of justice. Black fans cheered. It was payback time for 300 years of rape, lynchings, castrations, separate water fountains, and seats at the back of the bus. O.J. could not be tried twice for the same crimes. That was double jeopardy. But the Goldman family sued in civil court for the wrongful death of their son and Nicole. No longer burdened by guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the new jury was mandated to decide if the weight of the evidence indicated Simpson had taken the lives of Ron and Nicole. Under stern Judge Hiroshi Fujisaki, the story played out again. Simpson absurdly insisted multiple photos from different photographers showing him in the Bruno Magli shoes were faked, even though they had been printed in newspapers months before the murder. These jurors returned a verdict stating Simpson was liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. He was ordered to pay the incredible fine of $32 million to the two estates. Still asserting his innocence, Simpson announced he would spend the rest of his life looking for the real murderer. Those searches took place primarily on lush golf courses. The late 1960s saw a widespread movement of revolution against the established authority. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll were the order of the day. In addition to having fun, the generation of children born after World War II wanted to change the world into a better place. The movement came to a screaming halt on the morning of August 9, 1969. A police cataloged the carnage at a home once owned by Cary Grant. The death knell rang for peace and love. One man came to represent the dark side of social revolution, a living embodiment of what many feared. He was a killer hippie. His name was Charles Manson. Grandson of a psychotic alcoholic, bastard son of a prostitute, Manson spent most of his life on the streets, on the run, or incarcerated. Too short and scrawny to be physically overpowering, Manson used cunning instead. He dabbled in arcane methods of hypnotism, Scientology, but only to use them as tools to bend others' wills to his own. Manson's so-called hypnosis was what convicts call a jailhouse rap, a rambling monologue of disconnected but intense ideas and images punctuated with turns and spins. To impressionable minds, he was spellbinding. To a critical listener, he didn't say much at all. In 1967, after more than half a life behind bars, Manson arrived in San Francisco. The peace movement was in full swing. Dozens of receptive young girls arrived every day, flocking to Haight-Ashbury. Pot and LSD were plentiful. They could expand your mind, or, in the hands of a short, wild-eyed pimp, create a legion of mental and sexual slaves. Charlie moved south, locating his growing family in the derelict Spawn Ranch, formerly used as a western town for cowboy films. In addition to being a self-styled mystic, Manson fancied himself a singer and songwriter.
You drive my convict's mind your way, and it goes just to say, you better get on board.
His crude musical ability never got him anyplace, but his ability to provide drugs and girls made him bearable to borderline celebrities like Terry Melcher, son of producer Marty Melcher and actress Doris Day. Manson gathered around him a constantly changing group of followers, filling their minds with pseudo-mystic mumbo-jumbo. Living communally at the Spawn Ranch, the group called themselves the Family and lived off panhandling, petty theft, and eventually reselling stolen cars. Manson lectured to his followers, likening himself to Jesus, God, Satan, and anything else that crossed his mind. Isolated from families and past lives, the followers began to believe Manson. On the night of August 8th, Manson ordered a small squad of drug-addled commandos to attack the occupants of the former home of Terry Melcher. It didn't matter who lived there, they were rich, and that classified them as pigs. Charles Tex Watson was the leader, although he would later deny this. Accompanying Watson were Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel, with Linda Kasabian as a lookout. At the address Manson gave them on Cielo Drive in the Hollywood Hills, they shot a teenager, Steve Parent, as he sat at the wheel of his car. The group then went inside the house and terrorized the 4 people within. Wojtek Frykowski was shot in the back, pistol whipped so badly he had 13 dents in his skull, then stabbed 51 times. Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folgers coffee fortune, was stabbed so many times her white nightdress turned bright red. She managed to stumble onto the lawn before she expired. Hairstylist Jay Sebring was tied together with Sharon Tate. The rope looped over a beam in the front room. Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant and pleaded for the life of her baby. She was stabbed with a bayonet at least 16 times. Susan Atkins then tasted the blood of her victim. At first, police charged William Garrettson, caretaker, who lived in a small house at the rear of the estate. The 19-year-old couldn't explain why he hadn't heard screams the night before. The next night, Charlie sent his group out on a second mission. Leave a message, he told them, something witchy. Gino LaBianca lived in a Spanish-style home near Griffith Park with his wife Rosemary. He had no connection to the Tate house or the people in it. The only mistake LaBianca and his wife made was to think their home was safe. The murder mob easily broke in and killed the couple. The word war was carved into LaBianca's chest. A carving fork was stuck in his stomach. His wife had been strangled. On the walls, the killers had written, "Death to pigs." And on the refrigerator, "Helter Skelter." Since the LAPD already had their suspect in custody, they refused to acknowledge the obvious connection.
Actually, the homicides are not connected. I think the public and a lot of the media picked out the fact that they were similar in nature, possibly because of the blood and the inscriptions. But this is rather a common type of thing in homicides. We've had many cases before where the suspect is written in blood or in lipstick or various things of that nature.
The lawyers for William Garrettson got him released and exonerated, but the pieces of the puzzle remained baffling. Their next best suspect was Sharon's husband, who was out of the country at the time of the murders. As a director, Roman Polanski specialized in weird films, invoking an aura of sex and insanity. The plot of his parody, The Fearless Vampire Killers, placed Sharon in the midst of a cult of fiends in a luxurious castle.
2 men on a vampire hunt. Simple? They certainly are.
A check into Polanski's personal life uncovered stories of drugs and wild orgies with major Hollywood names. The rumors were true enough. Polanski's friend from film school, Wojtek Frykowski, considered himself a director but made a living selling drugs. His girlfriend Abby Folger was typical of heiresses in any era, disorderly, unlimited by middle-class morality. Jay Sebring had been Sharon Tate's lover before she married Polanski. With friends like Jack Nicholson and Hugh Hefner, Polanski suffered guilt by association. He had had his share of horror during his youth. The Polish-born director had barely escaped torture and death by the Nazis as a child. But since marrying Sharon, Polanski's raucous lifestyle quieted to a whisper. He had worked hard to create a normal life. He and Sharon planned to have their baby naturally with the Lamaze method. Now he was being blamed for the slaughter of his wife and unborn child.
The house is open now. The police has released it. And you can go and see the orgy place. You will see innumerable books about natural birth, which she was planning. And I was hurrying home because apparently I had to go to some kind of school with her. I never understood what it was, but I had to be present at these lessons or whatever it was. But I was going along with anything she said.
A week after the murders, a strangely synchronistic pair of new items appeared in the LA Times. Beside an article wondering who killed Sharon Tate was a small item about a gang of auto thieves arrested at Spahn Ranch. It was the Manson family, but the entire group was released within 48 hours because of an improper search warrant. A ranch hand at Spahn, Donald Shea, known as Shorty, got into a major fight with Manson when the group returned. Manson accused him of calling the police. Shorty was never seen again. Manson and his followers left for the desert. The family never questioned life without electricity, running water, or food. Charlie needed no such luxuries, and they emulated him. But the novelty wore thin very soon. To boost morale, Charlie had his family destroy an abandoned tractor and set it afire. Some of the lesser believers escaped, telling police of Manson's rages and threats against speaking out. Rangers and police rounded up the remaining members of the group. As usual, Manson hid from police, this time under a sink. When police found stolen vehicles nearby, the gang was sent into Indio County Jail. In custody, Susan Atkins mentioned several facts of the Tate LaBianca killings to a cellmate. Transferred to LA, she recounted the entire murder for police in a breezy, offhand manner. Charges were soon filed against the 5 actual killers in the slayings, as well as ringleader Charles Manson. He and the 3 female killers, Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Wesley Van Houten, stood trial together. Tex Watson, most brutal of the group on the 2 nights of murder, was in jail in Texas. His lawyers dragged the extradition process on for months. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi tried to find the motives for the murders to make sure Manson would be proven as guilty as the actual perpetrators. Former members of the family came forward, especially Linda Kasabian, who was the lookout the night of the first murder. Under grant of immunity, she told everything she knew. Bugliosi found the connection: the Beatles' White Album. In Charlie's warped mind, it was an encoded message to him and his followers. It was Charlie Manson's plan to cause a race war called Helter Skelter. Blacks would be blamed for the horrible murders, a race war codenamed Helter Skelter would erupt, and the nation would be decimated, leaving Charlie and his family to pick up the pieces and start a new civilization.
Well, this was a definition of Helter Skelter that Charlie gave. Now, if you look at this White Album, it's a Beatles album. There are many other songs. One of them is called Sexy Sadie. Sadie Glutz, also known as Susan Atkins, whatever you want to call her, she thought that the Beatles named this song after her. There's also a song called Piggies. There's also a song...
What is it in the Helter Skelter song?
Nothing particularly in that song right there, except the definition that Manson gave of it. There's another song in that same album called Blackbirds, talking about blackbirds fixing their wings and rising up. Charles Manson said the blackbird meant the black man.
Defense attorneys tried to make the girls appear like drug-addled puppets, placing the blame squarely on Manson. Bizarre behavior didn't help convince anyone. They acted independently. When Charlie carved a martyr's cross in his forehead, the girls did the same. Charlie cut off his hair to show society he was a condemned prisoner, and the girls followed suit. Loyal family members outside the court chanted, staged sit-down strikes, and railed against the system they perceived as unfair, making a martyr of a peace-loving man. In court, Charlie spouted off as well, answering reporters' questions in his usual fashion.
I don't accept the whole situation. You know, like I was in the desert minding my business. This confusion belongs to you. It's your confusion. I don't have any confusion. I don't have any guilt. I know what I've done, and no man can judge me. I judge me. What have you done, Charlie? I've stayed in the desert and run with the coyotes and ate off the plants and found out you could live out there without this society. And that's where I'd like to go live, you know. But you won't let me go, will you?
You don't owe anything to society?
Pardon?
You don't owe anything to society now?
Owe him anything? I've paid him 22 years of my life. You know, I'm the other end of your society. You know, so you can ride your bicycles and do your thing. I live in your reform schools and your orphanages. I'm not against you. I'm not against you.
President Richard Nixon nearly caused a mistrial when he referred to Manson as being guilty long before the case was over. Headlines repeated the charge across the country. Manson smuggled a copy of the LA Times into the court, waving it at the jury. The members of the jury denied to the judge that they had seen it or that it would affect their decision. The case dragged on for 9.5 months, the longest and most expensive murder trial in the U.S. to that time. In the end, they were all found guilty. In 1975, Manson family spokeswoman Lynette Fromm, called Squeaky by the family, tried to shoot President Gerald Ford in San Francisco. Luckily for him, the gun didn't go off. Unluckily for her, she was caught. Charlie Manson denied any responsibility. From prison, Manson became the leader of a bigger cult, a cult of personality. A younger generation glorified him as an anti-hero. Rock singer Marilyn Manson took Charlie's name out of misplaced veneration. Charlie Manson and his followers appear regularly before the California parole boards. Just as regularly, prosecutor Vince Bugliosi and members of Sharon Tate's family testify against them. The killers remain behind bars.
I feel good feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad.
Psychopathic people, as I understand it, are people who have no feelings, have no understanding when they're doing something wrong or don't care, live by their own rules. And for the most part, that's absolutely the antithesis, the opposite of what I really am in real life.
Sunset and Hollywood boulevards evoke glamour, wealth, and fun. The rock clubs, the trendy restaurants, the fashionable hotels. But at night, a man could get anything he wanted. Yolanda Washington worked the scene. Her nude body was found on October 17, 1977, on a hillside near Forest Lawn Cemetery. She had been strangled with a piece of cloth. The murder of a hooker was not news. Even the autopsy was routine, with one exception. She had evidently had sex with 2 men before her death, one of whom was a non-secretor, a rare trait in which no blood appears in the sperm. The next month, another hooker turned up nude and strangled, a 15-year-old runaway named Judy Miller, who had also been working Hollywood Boulevard. She also showed evidence of sex with 2 men, one of whom was a non-secretor. 5 days later, a third nude strangled body showed up, this time on a golf course, 20-year-old Linda Caston. Within a month, there were 7 more victims. The first 2 were hookers, Jill Barcob, 18, and Kathleen Robinson, 17. 20-year-old art student Christina Weckler was found on a street corner. Dolly Cepeda and Sonia Johnson were found nude on a garbage dump. They were 12 and 14 years old. They had both been raped, sodomized, and strangled. The murders were becoming more gruesome. Jane King, 28, was found in bushes off the Golden State Freeway in the same area. Lauren Wagner, 18, was last seen being abducted by 2 men, one an older, bushy-haired man who appeared Latin, and a young man with acne scars. The Glendale and Los Angeles police joined forces with the sheriff's department, forming a task force. But in a massive area connected by freeways, hunting the murderer was a daunting task. The terrified public knew the killer as the Hillside Strangler, but the police knew they were looking for a two-man team. Still, their list of suspects had 8,000 to 9,000 possible names of known or suspected sex offenders. The corpse of 17-year-old call girl Kim Martin was found in a vacant lot on Alvarado Street. Her service listed her last destination as the Tamarind Apartments nearby. A resident told police he had heard screams in the night. His name was Ken Bianchi. In February 1978, police found a Toyota halfway down a cliff in Los Angeles National Forest, a 15-minute drive from the other Strangler locations. In the trunk was the naked body of 20-year-old Cindy Hudspeth. She too had been raped, and she had lived opposite victim number 6 in Glendale, California. Police know serial killers don't just stop. No further bodies showed up on Glendale hillsides. That told the task force that the killers had either been arrested on some other charge, they were dead, or they left the area. Far north in the small town of Bellingham, Washington, 2 young women were found strangled. The boyfriend of one said a security guard offered Karen Mandick and girlfriend Diane Wilder $100 to house sit. The security guard calmly told police he knew nothing about the girls or the offer. His name was Kenneth Bianchi. He said he'd recently moved from the LA Glendale area. He gave his former address as the Tamarind Apartments. Stolen property from the girls and the house linked Bianchi to their deaths. He denied everything. Kenneth Bianchi was the 27-year-old illegitimate son of a New York prostitute, given up for adoption at birth. A clever liar and habitual thief, he also studied police techniques, a habit many serial killers have found useful. Under hypnosis, examiners regressed Bianchi to his childhood. His hypnotic memories contained violent abuse of him by his mother.
My mother is a loving person. She goes overboard. Punishment that she went through, they were really just really stern. I remember she put my hand over the fire once in the stove.
Child abuse often lays a foundation for adult criminal behavior. With the passing of the years, Bianchi now dismisses its importance.
That's really convenient. That's really a stupid thing. They've said that for years. And that's really stupid. If you look back, the police have interviewed almost every woman I've ever dated. And not a single woman has said a bad thing about me. In fact, they've said that my relationships with them have been very normal, which they have been. They have not found a single instance where I have done anything that you could classify as hating women, other than their allegations about these crimes.
But serial sex offenders and killers often have superficially normal relations with the opposite sex, except when they're in the mood to murder. Multiple personalities came out under hypnosis. Seen in films like Sybil and 3 Faces of Eve, the phenomenon was rare and easy to fake.
Hey, I killed a couple of these. I killed those broads, you know, to smarten him up, to show him that he couldn't push me around.
The confession of Bianchi's supposed alter ego was verified by Bianchi himself in court. Years later, he recanted, saying police planted the confessions in his mind by hypnosis.
A lot of people assume that the details I gave the police during the hypnosis and from the hypnosis were genuine. As it turns out, and as is explained in my book in detail, a lot of the details I gave the police are untrue, have turned out to be totally untrue, but the police don't seem to care. All they care about is they got a confession, they got a conviction, case closed.
Bianchi incriminated his cousin, Angelo Buono, who lived in Glendale, making his living as an upholsterer and a pimp, taking sadistic glee from debasing women who worked for him. Together, Buono and Bianchi matched the description of the 2 men spotted with victim 9, Lauren Wagner. Bianchi testified against his cousin, and both Buono and Bianchi got life in prison for the murder of the 9 victims of the Hillside Strangler. A few years later, a bizarre sequel played itself out. A would-be actress and writer named Veronica Lynn Compton started writing to Bianchi in prison. For whatever reasons, Veronica decides to mimic the murder technique to imply the hillside strangler was still at large and Ken Bianchi was innocent.
I did not commit any murders at all.
Sulking 17-year-old Charlie Starkweather caught a lot of smirks and insults in Lincoln, Nebraska. Red-haired, 5'2", bespectacled and bow-legged, Charlie patterned himself after movie idol James Dean, who died in a car crash 3 years before in 1955. Charlie copied Dean's manner, his hairstyle, even Dean's way of dangling a cigarette coolly from his lips. He dropped out of high school, but work as a garbage man was just as bad. He carried a rifle with him everywhere, spewing profanity at total strangers from his truck. The only time Charlie seemed happy was with Carol Ann Fugate. Girls his own age thought he was too short, but 14-year-old Carol Ann understood him, even if her parents didn't. She was a rebel, too. Carol Ann frequently told her mother to go to hell. In later years, Carol Ann claimed the relationship was rocky. The teenage garbage man blew his cool on December 1st, 1957. He robbed a gas station in Lincoln, abducted attendant Bob Colvert, and drove the 21-year-old man into the wheat fields and shot him in the head. He kept his secret for 7 weeks, amused at police inability to find the culprit. In January, he drove out to see Carol Ann, but only her mother, Velda, and Carol's stepfather were home. They told Charlie to put his .22 caliber rifle away. Charlie shot them both to death. Carol Ann showed up a little bit later, in time to see Charlie strangle her 2-year-old sister and stuff her body in a cardboard box. Carol Ann decided she'd watch TV, and Charlie made some sandwiches. He put a sign on the front door that said, "Stay away, everybody is sick with the flu." They hung out together in the death house for 6 days. Neighbors and relatives started to get suspicious, so the teenagers split. A few miles away, Charlie's car got stuck in the mud. Charlie walked to the home of young August Meyer, a hunting companion. Charlie shot the man dead. Then he and Carol Ann looted the home of money and guns. Charlie and Carol Ann walked off to the highway, getting a lift from a teenage couple, Robert Jensen and Carol King. The teenage couple's offer of a ride was rewarded with kidnapping at gunpoint. Charlie forced Jensen to drive back to the Meyer farm. While Carol Ann waited in the car, Charlie shot Jensen in the head 6 times, then raped and murdered Carol King. Jensen's 1950 Ford was okay, but Charlie wanted to trade up. The kids drove to an estate on Charlie's garbage route, the home of C. Lauer Ward. Charlie went to work with gun and knife, killing Ward, his wife Clara, and their housekeeper. Charlie stole Ward's classy 1956 Packard and took off for the state line with Carol Ann. By now, police had swarmed through the abandoned Fugate home and found 3 bodies in a shed. Suspecting Little Red Starkweather, a posse spread through the flat farmland, soon discovering the second murder scene at the Meyer house. By the discovery of the 3rd multiple murder at the Ward home, 1,200 police and 200 National Guardsmen were on the lookout for the teenage killer. Charlie Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate had slipped through the cordon hours before and driven west into Wyoming. Charlie decided he wanted another car. In Douglas, Wyoming, he shot the napping driver, a traveling shoe salesman named Merle Collinson. Another motorist, Joseph Sprinkle, pulled over to help what he thought was a man with motor trouble. Instead, he found himself in a life-and-death battle with a mad dog killer. A moment later, Sheriff's Deputy Bill Romer pulled up. Carol Ann suddenly screamed for help. The deputy chased Starkweather at speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour over the Wyoming highway. A shotgun blast took out Charlie's rear tire. A bullet smashed through the rear window of Charlie's car, and a piece of glass nicked his neck. Thinking he'd been shot, he pulled over, cowering and whimpering. "Real tough guy, aren't you?" Sheriff Earl Heffman said. He and Deputy Romer took the whining Charlie into custody. When newsreel cameramen and reporters showed up, Charlie again assumed his James Dean pose. His poise lasted only so long. At first, he told officers Carol Ann had nothing to do with the multiple murders. When Charlie realized his honorable stance earned him a death sentence, he changed his story. No, his girlfriend was part of it all along. Carol's lawyers painted her as the terrified victim of a kidnap who never pulled the trigger herself.
Did you ever break down and cry and beg Charlie to let you go or anything like that?
Yes, I cried all the way.
Now, had you gone with him for quite a while?
Yes, I went with him a year before, and then I told him I didn't want to see him again, but he came back. And up to that Sunday, I went with him, and then I kept telling him to leave. And that Sunday, I told him to leave, and I told him I didn't ever want to see him again.
Why, what had brought you to this conclusion? Why didn't you want to go with him anymore?
I think he's crazy.
Prosecutors pointed out Carol Ann held victims at gunpoint before their executions. Trying to save his own skin, Charlie Starkweather incriminated his ex-love. While on the run, they stopped for sandwiches in a roadside cafe. Carol Ann said to him, "Those hamburgers were lousy. We ought to go back and shoot all them people in that restaurant." Carol Ann Fugate received a life sentence for her role in the 11 murders. Charlie said, "It's a shame. I would have liked to have had her in my lap when they put me in the electric chair." At Nebraska State Penitentiary, Charlie was asked if he wanted to donate his eyes to the eye bank so that someone could benefit from his death. True to form, Starkweather sneered, "No one ever did anything for me. Why the hell should I do anything for anyone else?" At midnight on June 24th, 1959, 5 1200-volt jolts of electricity passed through Charles Starkweather. Authorities granted parole to Carol Ann Fugate 17 years later. Her part in the week of murder on the Nebraska Badlands was officially forgiven.